There are places where fear doesn't come from darkness. It comes from knowing what really happened there. Trans-Allegheny was built as a psychiatric hospital in the 1800s. Today, it is open for guided tours, and people who walk inside now, visitors, tourists, researchers, all describe the same feeling. The moment they enter the building, they feel watched. The corridors are quiet, but not empty. Some visitors hear footsteps behind them, even when the group is standing still. Others hear soft sounds coming from rooms that no one has entered for years. And in one of the wards, people have seen a small ball roll across the floor by itself. It stops, then changes direction. No wind, no explanation. This is not a story from the past. This is what people experience today inside Trans-Allegheny. And once you walk in, you don't leave unchanged. Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. Later, Weston State Hospital. Quick facts. Location: Weston, West Virginia, USA. Founded 1858. Construction began. First patients admitted October 22nd, 1864. Closed May 1994. Type: State Psychiatric Hospital. Design capacity about 250 patients. Peak population reported at over 2,400. Why it was built in the first place. In the mid-1800s, the U.S. went through a big shift in how people talked about mental illness. Before that, a lot of mentally ill people ended up in jails, in basements, locked in sheds, behind houses, literally chained up. Then the idea started spreading that madness was an illness, not a crime. So the message became, treat people instead of punishing them. Virginia, back when West Virginia was still part of it, decided to build a major state hospital, one of the biggest institutions west of the Appalachians. They picked Weston because it was isolated, far from major cities, and honestly, because it was convenient. If you wanted to remove people from public view, you could do it there. From day one, even if officials called it treatment, it also functioned as a place to separate and hide people. The architecture, a building that was supposed to heal by itself. The hospital was designed using what's known as the Kirkbride plan. At the time, people genuinely believed things like sunlight could heal long, orderly hallways would calm the mind, strict symmetry would organize a person's thoughts. The complex is massive, often described as one of the largest brick buildings of its kind in North America. The main structure is long, with wings stretching out from the center. Men and women were kept separate. Quieter patients were placed closer to the middle. People labeled violent or unmanageable were pushed farther out into the outer wings. It took around 23 years to fully build out. That alone tells you something. This wasn't a normal hospital. It was a machine that was built to run for a long, long time. Who ended up there and why? Officially, it was for people with mental disorders. In reality, it often absorbed anyone society didn't want to deal with. Women with postpartum depression, wives who didn't behave the way a husband wanted, kids who would now be recognized as autistic. Back then, people didn't understand it at all. People with epilepsy, alcoholics, immigrants who couldn't speak English, poor people, veterans with what we'd now call PTSD. Back then, it was framed as nervous weakness. People with late-stage syphilis, deaf, or non-speaking people, or just people labeled odd. In many cases, it didn't take much. A signature from a family member or a judge could be enough. Diagnoses were often vague and loaded with judgment, moral insanity, hysteria, melancholia, overactive imagination, overcrowding, and the slide into hell. On paper, 250 patients. In real life, by the early 1900s, it was already well over 1,000 by the 1940s. 50s, it's commonly reported around 2,000 to 2,400. That meant 3 or 4 people to a single bed, people sleeping on floors, hallways turned into sleeping areas, not enough water, not enough food, not enough clothes. One staff member trying to manage dozens of patients. Doctors couldn't truly treat people at that scale. The place shifted into control mode, not therapy, not recovery, just keeping the building from exploding into chaos. The treatments. This is where it gets brutal. Physical restraints, straitjackets, leather straps, isolation rooms. People could be restrained for hours, sometimes longer. Water therapy, ice-cold baths, forced soaking, cold water dumping. Sometimes it was presented as calming. Sometimes it functioned as punishment. Electroshock. In the early era, electroshock was used without anesthesia. Seizures, injuries, and memory loss weren't rare, just part of the process. Lobotomies. This is the darkest chapter. In the early 1950s, Weston State Hospital was tied to what's often referred to as the West Virginia Lobotomy Project. Lobotomies were performed in large numbers. The idea was simple and horrifying. Damage the frontal lobes so a person becomes less aggressive, less emotional, more manageable. But the outcomes were often devastating. People became blank, apathetic, emptied out. Some lost speech. Some lost their personality completely. Some died from complications. On paper, it could be labeled successful. In reality, it was often a way of erasing a human being. Death became routine. The hospital had its own cemetery. Many graves were unnamed, marked only with numbers tied to incomplete records. Official causes of death might say pneumonia, exhaustion, heart failure. But when you look at the conditions, a lot of deaths were likely connected to malnutrition, infection, violence, neglect, and sometimes families weren't properly notified. People could disappear into the system and never truly come back. The 1935 fire. In 1935, a fire broke out in one of the male wards. Some patients weren't able to get out fast enough. Officially, it's often described as not having massive loss of life. But record keeping in places like this wasn't always complete or reliable. Either way, the hospital didn't stop. It didn't shut down. It was repaired and kept running. The system mattered more than the individual. Racial segregation. Black patients were housed separately. Conditions there were worse. Fewer staff, less care, more isolation. That's not legend. Segregation was part of the era, and institutions like this reflected it. Closing. By the 1980s and early 1990s, the building was deteriorating, standards were changing, the public was less willing to accept giant warehouses for people. In May 1994, the hospital closed. Patients were transferred to a newer facility, and the old building went silent. After it closed, how the legends were born. When a place holds pain for 130 years and then suddenly empties out, people start listening for what's left behind. By the late 1990s, and especially the 2000s, the building became a tourist site. Visitors and staff have reported things like footsteps in empty corridors, voices coming from closed wings, crying, doors slamming, sudden panic or pressure, like the air gets heavy, strange shadowy shapes in photos. To be clear, no one has proven ghosts are real there, but no one seriously disputes the other part. People suffered there. People were broken there. People died there. People were forgotten there. Why it still scares people, not because of one ghost story, because it's a monument to how easily a society can take people it doesn't understand or doesn't want and lock them away. Trans-Allegheny isn't a myth. It isn't a made-up horror set. It's a real archive of human suffering, sealed inside brick walls.